Well, hello, buddy, and welcome back to the Showrunner Whisperer. This is your podcast, your show where we take you inside the mind of Hollywood television showrunners and what goes into being a showrunner in today's media landscape. I'm your host, Andy Bacht, or you can just call me Andy B or Andy, whatever you prefer. And if you're a new listener, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. What's up? Glad to see you? Question mark. How does this work? Because I've been podcasting for over 10 years, and I still like when you say good to see you, because it's easy when you're doing like a live stream, like a video chat or something, like that's when you can say good to see you. But I'm rambling, which it's good most of the times for a podcast. So as I said on the last episode, this episode you're about to listen to is coming a little bit later than usual. There was no episode last week because we had to move around the schedule a little bit because today is Thursday, April 25th. And for anyone who is a big viewer of Netflix shows, you know that today is the launch for Dead Boy Detectives, the latest entry into the Sandman universe on Netflix. And I had the honor of chatting with STEVE YOCKEY, who is the co-showrunner of Dead Boy Detectives and who you may know from having created the Flight Attendant. And we got a chance to set up this interview, but the condition was that we make sure that this can run when the show premieres so that we can talk about spoilers, because I've seen the whole season. I hope you guys, if you're about to watch season 1, I am so excited. Enjoy. Let me know what you think on social media. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts. But yeah, I sat down with Steve and we chatted about uh, taking on the Dead Boy Detectives property and joining the Sandman franchise, because this is a show that has been in development for now almost 3-4 years, and it has it started on HBO Max, or Max as it's called now, and then it got moved to Netflix, and now as you will see throughout the show, you will see the corners that it fits into in the larger Sandman universe. And we will talk about his journey with the Flight Attendant, of becoming a showrunner and then getting struck by a pandemic. It's not easy, and we talk a lot about the ups and downs of being in this industry. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this episode. Again, I want to just give a huge thank you to everyone who's been supporting the podcast since we debuted it. And episode 1 and 2 has been doing great with Kato Shimizu and Margaret Hayden. And guys, we have so many more guests coming up, and I'm so excited. May is going to be a really big month, so look forward to that. But yeah, I once again appreciate anyone who's been linking to us, or referencing quotes and articles or YouTube videos and whatnot. Massively appreciate it. Helps us get more word out there about the Showrunner Whisperer, because I want this show to grow. I want the audience to grow, and I want it to lead to more possibilities. So massive thank you to all of you. If you want to support the podcast in a great way, head over to Apple Podcasts and look up the Showrunner Whisperer. We also have the link in the show notes right there for you, so you don't have to search for anything. Just click, I guess. So if you have just a few minutes of your time, if you could leave a 5-star review and just let us know what you think about the show, what you're enjoying about it, what are some things we could still improve upon, that would be massively appreciated. And because it gets more people to discover the show, it gets higher up on the Apple Podcast rankings in TV and film category, and that's a huge way to support the podcast. And that's all I can ask for. You can also, of course, review us and rate us on all the other subscribe platforms for all that you can listen to podcasts on. So yeah, I again appreciate all the love and support we've gotten so far. And listen, we're just getting started. As you can tell, I'm a little bit amped up. I'm a little bit, really excited, because again, I really hope you guys will enjoy this episode with Steve, and he has some really cool stories to share, and also just interesting challenges to overcome. So I'm gonna stop talking, and we're gonna cue the music, and we're gonna let you enjoy this interview with STEVE YOCKEY. Enjoy, everyone, and we'll see you at the end. always ask anyone who comes on the Showrunner Whisperer is, because always everyone has their own different answers about it. Is what is your definition of a showrunner?
I guess a showrunner is the person that's ultimately responsible for the voice of the show and ultimately responsible for delivering the show. That's it.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. For people who may not know how you got started in the world of Hollywood and writing and so on, what is your if someone had to pick up your as you can see, I have a lot of comic book stuff in my background. So if you had to pick up, if someone had to pick up the issue 1 of your origin story, what is the tale of Steve Yockey?
Wow, that's a fun question. I guess I'm born and raised in Atlanta, wanted to be a writer, but was afraid. So did a lot of other things until I finally kind of committed to writing in my mid-20s. Mostly a playwright for a long period of time. I still continue to write plays. Theater is very important to me. It's how I stay sane with all this other stuff. I was finishing a residency, I guess, out in San Francisco. It was a year-long residency that was funded by a bunch of different organizations. And when it ended in 2010, I could no longer afford to live in San Francisco without that support. So my reps at the time were like, you should try going to Los Angeles. You've always talked about how you want to write for television. You should give it a shot. And I was very much like, other people get to do that. I don't get, like, that's not something I'm going to get to do. But I said I'd give it 6 months. And it was a weird 6 months, but 5 months into it, I lucked out and Sony bought one of my projects, not optioned, but like fully purchased, which was a surprise and gave me the sort of resources to hang out in LA a little bit longer and fight the fight to get staffed. And then it was just moving through shows until I landed on Supernatural, where I stayed for 4.5 years. I loved that show, and working on it was a pleasure. And then the Flight Attendant took off. Oh, wow. No pun intended. And then I was doing it. Then I was showrunning. And it was crazy because our first season was also when we had to stop for 5 months because of the pandemic. And I learned a lot in that first year of being a showrunner. I think the biggest thing that I learned in that first year, I was really afraid at first. I was like scared that I was going to disappoint people. The Southern boy in me didn't want to bother anyone. I just wanted everything to work right while I quietly went about my business. And I think having the pandemic come in the middle of that really helped me understand coming back up after the what we called it, a production pause. I guess that's what Warner Brothers called it. Coming back up after that to finish season 1 was very much like discovering what's important and what's just noise. And so I feel very focused as a showrunner now on the elements, delivering the elements of the show and delivering a consistent show. And I'm not super worried about the little things that people call and freak out or yell about and stuff like that if it's not germane to delivering the show.
Before you became a showrunner, do you remember, what do you remember, what was a showrunner who had a big impact on you? Where you learned a lot, that because you said you were working on Supernatural, you worked on some other things beforehand, but like what were some of the early lessons that you learned from seeing how they were doing things as a showrunner?
I would say Andrew Dabb and Bob Singer, who were the showrunner and executive producer respectively of Supernatural during my time there. I learned from Andrew, don't sweat the small stuff. That's what I would say. I don't think he would say it that way, but he had a very kind of just roll with it attitude towards running a show. And Bob Singer has been an executive producer on television since like St. Elsewhere. I mean, forever. And so he would come and sit with us in the little writers area where we would have lunch or coffee in the morning and just tell us stories and talk to us about sort of his wealth of history. It makes it sound like he was just like walking around talking about himself. He wasn't. We would ask him. But I found him really fascinating. And he managed to be someone that you respected, but also felt approachable, even at his level, which is something that I think is very important in a showrunner. I know that there's sometimes the knee-jerk instinct to want people to fear you. So it kind of creates a bubble around you and it motivates people to try and please you. But my experience has been, if you make yourself approachable and you give people the space and resources they need to do their best work, then they will do that. You don't need to make them afraid to come to work.
Moving in a little bit to the Flight Attendant, do you remember how did that project came about? How did it land on you in your laps in terms of because I guess everyone has their own different has their own story of when they get the call to be a showrunner. So how did that come about for you?
Well, I was on Supernatural. I was very happy. I had a project at Fox that was about to go, so I thought I was going to get to be a showrunner there. And so all of a sudden, Warner Brothers called, and they were like, "Hey, Kaylee Cuoco optioned this book," because Kaylee was the lead producer. She optioned the book. It came from her, and she's already got the studio on board, and she's already got it set up for TNT at the time with Sarah Aubrey, but nobody knew what it was. Everybody just wanted to work with Kaylee. So they were like, "We want to do this thriller. We want to work with Kaylee. We'll do whatever." And so they had sort of like they call it a bake-off, where everybody gets to come in and pitch like what their version of the show is. I think I was pretty early in that process, and I thought I'm very comfortable on Supernatural because it's a fun place to work and the residuals are insane. And I have this other show at Fox that everybody thinks is going to go. So if I pitch on this book, I want to pitch like I'll take a big swing. And they said something about the book, like the book is very serious, but what we're looking for is I have the letter still, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment meets Fleabag, which to me is like one of those this meets this that just kind of like blew my mind a little bit, because I was like, what are they? Okay, this is a very open field. So I went and kind of pitched my take, which was a little wacky, and I was not expecting any traction. And people just kept saying yes up the ladder. And Kaylee was sort of like the boss at the end of the video game. Like after I pitched to the network, like literally after I pitched to the network, I pitched to Kaylee. That was really fun. And she's the person who said, "Let's hire him." And I remember in that first conversation, I was like, "I'm not going to lie to you. Like Cassie in my version is in every scene. This is going to be a real workout, especially coming off of, 3 days or 4 days a week of filming Big Bang Theory, because it's a much lighter schedule. It's not easier, it's just lighter." And she said, "I'm ready, I can do it." And she did.
You talked about that because I cannot imagine, again, I'm just someone who writes about television film, but I can't imagine being on the other end when something like the pandemic happens. What do those early days look for you? You're running your first show, and the world gets shut down. So how do you navigate it? What do you remember from those days?
It was sort of very close and intense right before everything shut down, because we were filming in Brooklyn. We were in Greenpoint, was where our stages were, Brooklyn, and filming all around Manhattan. And it was sort of like, it was like background noise, like, oh, this thing is happening. It's starting to spread. Like there are hot spots. And one of the hot spots that was like the major hot spots was Westchester County in New York. And we were supposed to film. It was the Wednesday before the shutdown. Everything shut down on a Monday. It was the Wednesday before the shutdown. And on that Thursday, we were supposed to go, our entire company, to Westchester to shoot. And we were like, our line producer and our UPM were like, we don't think we should go. And then the studio was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't go." And the network was like, "Okay, you're not going." And so I was like, "Oh God, we're gonna have to eat that day. Like, this is crazy. What are we gonna do?" And then the next day they were like, "We're shutting down for 2 weeks. Get on a plane and come back to LA." And I was like, whoa. By the time I got back, which was on Saturday, they had sort of announced that, hey, Monday, everything's going to lock down. And that first, I don't know if anybody has the clearest memory of that. The first week was weird because we've never experienced anything, like none of us had ever experienced anything like that in our lifetimes. I think like 2 weeks into it, HBO Max started like saying like, okay, well, this is going to be a little bit, because at first it was just 2 weeks. Like everybody was under the impression we were going to shut down for 2 weeks and it was going to go away and the world was going to open up. And I don't know if you remember that. That was
I remember.
Hopeful. It was very hopeful, very optimistic of all of us. So about 2 weeks after, HBO Max started like being in touch. And then about 3 weeks in, or like right at the beginning of April, actually. So 3 weeks in, although that last 3 weeks of March felt like 7 years. Like that's what I remember. We started post again in remotely. We started doing post on the episodes we had finished, which was 1 through 5 at that point. They kind of kept us working until July, just from home. So I didn't really experience the big out of work that a lot of people experienced. But and then in July, literally, Jess, my number 2 on the show, and I flew back to New York and quarantines for 3 weeks and started scouting locations for when they opened up New York to a larger footprint and we could start shooting again. We were, I think, one of the first shows to come back up in New York. Well, Blue Bloods, I think, was the first show. It was like back up. So CBS, got to get that Blue Bloods. And so we were 2 or 3, something like that. We had a special permission from, and this is where it gets murky for me, so I'm not going to speak a lot on it, but we had a special permission from the studio, like a particular disposition to be able to bargain directly with the unions in New York on safety measures to get up and running again before the kind of mass collective bargaining happens. So we had really, really, really stringent safety measures, but it paid off because we didn't have anyone get sick during those 2 months while we finished shooting, and we made it to the end. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the cast and crew for kind of making it happen in that situation where everyone was, there was no vaccine. Every day you kind of wake up, knock on wood, and go, I hope nobody gets really sick. Not because we were going to shut down, but because there wasn't, if you got sick, you could end up in the hospital on a ventilator. So it wasn't a casual thing. So my most memorable thing is that when we finished filming, the last thing we filmed was Michelle Gomez like backing over someone's body, and then she was released, and the stunt player was released, said thank you to the crew, got in the car to go back to the hotel, and just my body started shaking weirdly, and I realized it was like all the tension from like being terrified leaving my body finally because we had finished, or we had finished shooting. It was a weird time, man. It was very strange.
No, I remember because one of the shows I covered heavily back then, was specifically a Warner Bros. Show. So I remember seeing a lot about, when they were coming out about updates about how they were approaching filming for that season of like, oh, there's not, like physical scenes are not going to happen as much, and there's going to be this and this and this. So I'm just thinking like, yeah, I'm just someone who writes about it. I don't know what it's like to be on the other end. So I commend everyone, you, including yourself and your team, that especially for this is your first time running a show, and you have to deal with a pandemic that again, we've never faced it before. So and I'm glad to hear no one got sick and so. But yeah, that like when you were telling me the story, I was starting to shake. I'm like, oh no, like imagine getting sick on like the last day after all this.
I literally can't imagine. But you know what? Honestly, Meredith Lavender and Marcy Yulin are a writing team that were the co-showrunners of season 1 of The Flight Attendant. They were fantastic during that period. They did not come to New York because we couldn't have tons of people on set, so they were kind of remotely doing things. And then Jess Meyer, the number 2 on the show, was there every day with me. And the studio, both the HBO Max and Warner Brothers, but I think Warner Brothers in particular, because they're the facilitators, were like, whatever you need, like literally health-wise, like how many tests do you need? How many technicians do you need to administer the tests? Like how much safety equipment do you need? And literally everything we needed was provided for us. And we couldn't shoot in a lot of locations that we had planned to shoot in because people didn't want an entire film crew in their building anymore because, it's an easy way to get COVID. HBO Max provided us with an entire extra gigantic stage at Kaufman Astoria, where Sarah K. White, our production designer, started just building everything that we needed. And it would go up, we would shoot, and it would come down because we had all the scripts, so we kind of knew what we needed. So everybody just made it happen. And in a largely like sometimes studios and networks, but especially studios can be very penny conscious. There wasn't any of that. Their concern was safety, which was, the right thing, I think.
No, God bless. I having finished that first season, but again, like, before the show had come out, because we saw the effects of how COVID was affecting various other productions and so on. Where I think there were even shows that had been renewed, but they had to get unrenewed, I think it's called. Because of COVID. Like, were you worried about like, am I gonna get to tell more of this story? Before it show, before people had seen the show, were you kind of worried, like, oh my god, will this be the only thing they get to see because we're in this pandemic? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like we were filming we were filming a scene from season 1 of The Flight Attendant where Kaylee had to run down a hall, see a giant like 12-foot tall rabbit, scream and run in the other direction, but we didn't have the rabbit obviously because it was CG, so we had a green screen, and every time she just kept running up to the green screen and yelling and running away, and I looked over at Jess and I was like, I hope the 11 people who watch this show really enjoy it, because we had no idea. I mean, we were making this really weird show, and everybody was being really supportive and excited about it, but also it was just a strange show, and so I didn't even know if, when we got out of post, like I didn't even know if we were going to watch it when it dropped on HBO Max, because HBO Max was even relatively new at that point. I mean, just been around since July.
Yeah.
And so once it started airing, though, that was weird because we were in the second lockdown, and there wasn't the sort of, you go out and see people or you run into people or you talk to people who are like, oh my gosh, the show. So it took a while for those of us that worked on it to even realize that it was hitting the way that it did. But after people, kind of got their eyes on it, I really wasn't worried about getting to do more. I just wondered if we would.
I know that we recently learned that, or not recently, but a few months ago we learned that the story, the side of the show will move on forward anymore. What can you take me a little behind the show coming to an end of, because again, I know that when shows when they get canceled, when they come to an end, so sometimes you will try to see if you can get on another platform or see if there's another way to bring it back. But like, what how did that look on your end, and how are you dealing with the show's conclusion?
I mean, I don't want to get into the details of it, but I will say that we felt very strongly that the end of season 1 could have been the end. We felt very strongly that this end of season 2 could have been the end. It was sort of like each time we were up to bat again, we were like, okay, do we want to tell another one of these flight attendant stories? That's how it was always designed, to be a different mystery each season. And I think it's one of those things where, like, maybe in a couple of years we'll all decide that we want to do it again and come back. But I think I can safely say we weren't canceled. We kind of made the decision that we weren't going to make anymore. And that had to do with a lot of moving pieces. But I feel really satisfied with the 2 seasons that we did. I feel very proud of them. I'm glad that season 2 was even weirder than season 1, which is, a fun thing to get away with. And now I'm just excited. Like, I'm excited about Dead Boy Detectives is about to launch, and I've got quite a lot on my plate. So whenever I think about it, I don't feel regret. I feel like we got to do what we wanted to do. And look, I mean, my career blew up out of it. Kaylee entered a whole new kind of stratosphere. People that were involved in the show, I think feel really good about it. So that's really all I can ask for.
Hey, how you doing, party people? Let me whisper in your ear. Tell you a little something you might like to hear. What's going on, brothers and sisters? It's your man, Brother Nate from the Lituation Room, as well as the Kings of Sport podcast. And I'm here to tell you about the Multiverse of Color. See, the Showrunner Whisperer is brought to you exclusively by Multiverse of Color. Now, Multiverse of Color is your home for fresh takes on the world of pop culture by established journalists and emerging content creators. It's your one-stop destination for a vast array of articles, as well as audio and video productions. Multiverse of Color features exclusive interviews, media event coverage, and film analysis. We're talking about all films, all movies out here on these streets, from Hollywood's biggest blockbusters to the most intimate of independent projects. So visit multiverseofcolor.com today, yes, today, right now, for all of the latest stories, and follow Multiverse of Color through the social media links provided in the description below. And now, back to the Showrunner Whisperer.
Well, let's talk about Dead Boy Detectives. I just finished a show today.
Oh, you watched all of it?
Listen, I'm that generation. If I get something and I get into it, I will binge the whole thing.
Okay,
And
all right,
yeah,
that's
I
healthy.
finished. Yeah, and I absolutely loved it. I've been, been waiting to see what was going to come out of this because I remember all the way back when when that when the detectives showed up on Doom Patrol,
Yeah.
and then hearing they're doing a spin-off, and I'm like, who are these characters? Because I'm not so much. I was so much into the Sandman aspect of the DC universe, but now having to gotten to know Charles and Edwin on a whole new level, it's been the greatest 8 hours of my week, to be honest. So
Oh
can
wow.
you yeah, no, listen, I'm a again, huge comic book fan, and I always love to see new characters, even if characters that I'm not very familiar with. So can you take me a little back into how did this project come to you? Because I'm guessing you're doing Flight Attendant, and now you did an episode of Doom Patrol, but then how did this particular project come about for you?
Um, I, I mean, it was lengthy because it's a passion project for me. So at first, I was writing the pilot for Flight Attendant, and while I was writing it, I was like, oh, everybody was happy with the outline. I'm leaving Supernatural if this goes. So I need to I'm one of those people that believes in you've got to have a lot of you need to have a couple things in development because, one person says no and it goes away. So you just need to be working on a bunch of things. And so that goes back to my not-for-profit playwriting background where I'm like, only eating ramen and please let me have this job. And I still kind of function in that way. So I went to Kyle Schmidt, who at the time was with Warner Horizon, and I was like, "Hey, can you ask DC if I might be able to adapt this weird little property that's probably on a shelf somewhere gathering dust? It's called Dead Boy Detectives." And he asked them, and they said no. And and I was like, "Oh no!" And then there was a regime change at DC, and I decided I would in the resulting kind of cloud of dust, I was like, let me slip in there and see if I can get it again. And this time it, I guess, somehow got to Jim Lee, who asked Neil Gaiman, and they both said okay. And then Susan Rovner was at Warner Brothers at the time, and she was like, whoa, 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 all things Sandman go through me because it's such an important property. So I had to go pitch to her. And then they said yes. And then I turned in for the pilot for Flight Attendant, and everybody got really excited. And then they were like, okay, we're gonna have you write the Dead Boy script. And then there were just these crazy changes in the studio over the next couple of AT&T and Ryan Keeler coming in and kind of saying we can only do DC projects at HBO Max. And then a new regime coming in and saying that's not true. We can do the projects anywhere. And it just kept kind of evolving over time through the studio. So I wrote a couple different versions of what the show would ultimately be. And it was Sarah Schechter at Berlanti Productions, who I'm working with on this, just like Flight Attendant. And she's an amazing producer. She's like a sword and shield. She's great.
No, I interviewed a few times. She's awesome. So I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, and she's one of those rare producers that will tell you exactly what she thinks, but not in a way that is designed to make you feel small. She's just very honest, and also she can have an issue with you and still turn around and squarely stand off against the studio and the network if things get weird. So she's just an incredible producer, incredibly supportive. And I took the project to Berlanti, and I was like, please do this with me because we had so much success on the last one, and also I can't do it by myself. And so Sarah said yes after talking to Greg, and they came on board, and then it was her, and it was Sarah Schechter and Susan Rovner who thought, oh, Jeremy, if he will let you, we should platform these characters on Doom Patrol because it's on HBO Max and the show's going to be on HBO Max, and then try and use that to get people to know the characters. So we did that. It went well. People seemed excited, but then it took a long time for the network to move on the show, and so we ended up having to recast because, as you know, those young actors kind of blew up in a lot of ways. And so, and I know there's a lot of rancor about that or sore feelings about that on yield internet. But I'm thrilled with the cast we have now. I'm thrilled with how it all came together. And I think this is what it's supposed to be. I mean, I feel very good about the show. And most importantly, Neil Gaiman feels really good about the show, which to the high school boy in me, that was
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I can't even look when I send him an email. I can't even imagine that I'm typing the address in. So, yeah, that's how it kind of came to be, and I'm really excited about it. We had that like weird moment where we moved from HBO Max to Netflix, which was in all the trades and everything. But Netflix has just been. HBO Max was incredibly supportive of the show. Like it wasn't negative at all. But Netflix has also been incredibly supportive, and they're putting a big push behind it. So I think they believe in it. I believe in it. I can't wait for people to see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it's always fun like, when I see people who you know when they pitch DC projects and so on, always finding what is the reason for these particular characters. Again, these are characters that people may not know as well as maybe someone like a Superman and so. So what was it that's so appealing about the Deadpool detective that you were like, I really want to tell their story? That's why you were pitching as much as you could about these two. What is it that brought? What made you fall in love with these two?
I love writing. I love finding different ways to explore grief, regret, loss. I love to explore those topics in a way that doesn't make you, want to go home and commit ritual seppuku. Like, I enjoy watching something sad or something moving, but it's fun when you can talk about darker topics through an upbeat lens, because it creates a sort of weird friction that like, I'm watching a show about death and regret and loss and longing and all these things, but it's fun to watch. So it can be about something and have emotional weight, but still be entertaining. And so the Dead Boys comic books are like an acid trip. Like it's the way that the art is on the page, the way that the dialogue is written, especially dialogue from different characters. And a lot of that is sort of an evolution of what Neil was doing in Sandman, but it kind of taken to a like the kids took over and it looks a little nutty. And I found the Dead Boy comic books. I had obviously read Seasons of Mist when Seasons of Mist came out. So I knew who the characters were, and I was like, they made a comic book just for these two kids. And I read the comic book, and I happened to be reading it at a time where I was going through a loss in my family, and I found it oddly comforting. And so I think for that reason, the show's not designed to be comforting, but the comic book was comforting to me, and that's why it kind of stuck in my head. And it's also just such a visual feast that I was like, this wants to be on television. Like, we had to age up the boys because you can't tell some of the stories that we want to tell with younger kids. And I don't mean like sex. I mean like the show starts dark, and as you know, gets darker and darker and darker in terms of subject matter. And so we just had to, we had to be responsible with the ages. But 16, 16, 17, you still got a lot to learn, especially if you're never going to grow up. So I think it is just hitting in that sweet spot.
Because I'm trying to remember the timeline of things. While you guys were developing Deadpool Detective, what was it at the same time as Sandman was also being worked on? Because when this was being developed for HBO Max, like what ties did you guys have with Neil Gaiman and the Sandman TV show on Netflix? Like, what was it always designed that we can have Death show up? Also, by the way, anything you say, well, again, you can talk spoiler, because I'm going to release the episode on the day the show premieres. That way, people can get into the post-mortem things. So, yeah, of course. So what was the design from the beginning, or like how did you guys have to retool anything between the HBO Max or Max change to Netflix?
It was really interesting. Like, so the Beth Schwartz, who's my co-showrunner, who ran Arrow,
love her.
She's fantastic. She and I really, really wanted to have the show. Look, the show is, you've seen it, but it's visually and tonally. Sandman is like a drama with a capital D, like the TV version of the Sandman. And so our show is not that. Our show is, the Hardy Boys on acid. And so tonally it was going to be different, but we wanted to have it take place in the same universe. And we had a meeting with Warner Brothers BA where many lawyers and business affairs people told us, don't you dare use anything that Netflix has the rights to, because they will fall on you like so many invading armies. And I was like, okay, so we have to avoid. So what we did was we built a season that to us took place, and then we avoided any conflicts, so that, you know, if one day they were like, oh, it all takes place in the same universe, you could be like, I'll buy that. But then when we moved to Netflix, Netflix came to us and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if you had some Easter eggs or some characters show up or some other things that kind of, you know, let's take advantage of the fact that Sandman's on our network also. And we were like, oh, I guess we could do that. Like, you know, we were very like, what a great idea. And then we went back to what we wanted to do and like put all of this stuff back in that we had to take out, and got to shoot it all. And I feel like I don't know, it's fun to be part of this larger universe. And I'm glad that we, even though it was difficult, made the choice when we were at HBO Max to try and fit into the Sandman universe, because then when we were put side by side with Sandman, it was effortless to kind of fold in all of the things, because we had already sort of set it up to do that.
From one fanboy to another, like, you must have lost your mind of like, I get to play with the toys that I've been in love with since, you know, however old you were. Of, you know, I mean, yeah, because again, you know, I can't imagine being told, you know, oh yeah, don't even think about touching these, and then suddenly being told, hey, let's do a bridge here, let's do some stuff together. I mean, how geeky was it for you getting to just finally embrace all of the Deadpool Detectives plays in the Sandman universe?
It was weird because it was a lot like playing The Floor is Lava. Like, it was like trying to make sure that we didn't cross streams with the Sandman on Netflix. You know, it was like, you can step here. Nope, can't step there. Okay, we can step here. So we were carving this very like circuitous path through the IP. And because you've seen the show, so we maintained their backstories to a pretty good extent, and with Crystal too, and I think it was like all of a sudden all the places that we weren't allowed to step were available to us, and all of a sudden all of these characters that, you know, I had grown up reading were, I say all of these, you know, everything is approved by Netflix and obviously approved by Neil and Alan, who runs Sandman. And I don't know, they were just so incredibly collaborative. It's a really good synergy, and it's amazing to synergy is one of those words that you immediately feel like when you say it out loud that you're in a corporate setting. So, but it was a really good dynamic between the two shows. And I think Sandman was done filming season 1 when we started filming our season 1, and they were writing season 2 when the deal closed with Netflix, and we were sort of allowed access to IP that lives in that world, characters and sort of Easter egg stuff. So it all just kind of worked out in a really crazy way, which sounds great. But I mean, it's a show that I've been working on for the same amount of time that I've been working on The Flight Attendant. And in that time, we've delivered 2 full seasons of The Flight Attendant that have aired, and had 2 years past that. And finally Dead Boys is coming out. So it's good. It feels really good.
Can you talk about, you know, finding the trio? Because my friend David Rappaport, who's the casting director on the show, he always nails the head on the spot when it comes to casting.
Yeah.
I know you were talking about it, that you had to recast and so on. Honestly, I feel maybe it probably was for the best, you know, because I totally get young actors, they always gotta keep moving and so on. So can you talk about finding these 3 for this version of the Deadpool Detectives?
Yeah, I think before we started the casting process, I was really disappointed because I love those kids, but from Doom Patrol. We started the process, and at first I was like, none of these people are them, and like it was sort of frustrating. But as we got deeper into the process, and David was working with other casting directors in London, and we were really trying to, you know, find the people. we started to see people, and I just started to like turn a corner and get excited about the possibilities. You know, having more diversity in the cast, having like just kind of mixing it up a little bit, like what, you know, and obviously we're seeing what Sandman did, what Neil did and Alan with the Endless, and kind of, oh, they aren't exactly like they are in the comic book. I mean, they're the characters are the same, but they look different, and you know, there's a broader range of faces and skin colors and tones and all these things. And so it was fun to see that and get inspired by that. And I think I want to say that the first person we landed on was maybe Jaden, or felt really strongly about, was Jaden for Charles. And then we saw George, and George came to every one of his auditions in a button-up shirt and tie and like schoolboy's jacket, which his
nailed the costume.
His commitment to that was, well, he had no idea he was then going to have to do the 1916 version of that, but like he just kept showing up in that outfit, and it was just a really winning thing. And also obviously doing a good job with the role. You've seen it, like out of the park. Their dynamic is incredible together. And then we found Cassius, and I think somewhere in the middle there is when we found Yu, but we knew when we saw Yu that she was going to be our Nico. Like, so yeah, it just kind of came together really well, and it was super fun putting the cast together. And actually a lot of the kids that we saw, I mean, they're a lot of the young adults that we saw for the roles ended up in the show in other roles or coming on in guest arcs. So it was a really, like, David did a fantastic job with the casting, like wrangling all these different casting directors. Because we had one in Australia, we had one a couple in London, in the UK, and then we had people in New York and then LA. And so yeah, we cast a wide net. But I think the kids that we found, they showed up. Like, they showed up and delivered.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, like, you know, even though, as you said, you were, you know, sad not being able to work with the initial cast, but you know, able to get, you know, because they're so charismatic together. Like, again, that's why, you know, and I will say this in the best way possible, as a gay man myself, I love how queer the show is. I just love, I said, like, there were so many episodes last night I was watching, I'm like, this is so gay, and I'm so into it. I'm, you know, I'm a shipper, so I was kind of like, oh, I like these together, I like these together, I like these together. So, and you talked about you wanted to work in diversity into it, is, again, it really reflects on the world we live in today, which, you know, how much is on your conscious mind of when you're writing these characters of, yeah, we're reimagining some of them. We're creating our own little elements to it, because I know there's, you guys are expanding more upon what is beyond the Deadpool comic at this point. So, how much did that play into producing season 1?
I mean, just like with the Flight Attendant, I'm a big proponent of, like, I want there to be a huge range of people on the show. I want different ethnicities. I want different sexualities. I want different, because I want it to look like the world. I mean, it's such a cliched thing at this point, coming out of like equity, diversity, and inclusion kind of seminars and everything, that they're like, it needs to look like the world that I see when I look around me. And so it like feels like a very buzz word kind of thing, but it's you don't walk around in a world full of white men. You know, we need the diversity, and I don't walk around in a world that is a bunch of straight people, and I don't walk around in a world where everyone thinks the same thing. And so we want a diversity of ideas, appearances, race, ethnicity, sexuality, all of it represented in the show, but without, this is very important in quotes, like hitting people with a hammer, like, oh, this is the very special episode where we talk about Charles's ethnicity, or this is the very special episode where, you know, Crystal learns what it is to grow up as a young Black girl, or like, I mean, we don't do that. It's just a given in our world. And so people talk about how queer the show feels. I think that's just because of everyone's allowed to just be. And so without the sort of boundaries that are often put in place on television, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this feels very queer, and it is.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I never felt like it was being, you know, like shoved down my throat or anything like that. You know, for example, like everything that has to do with he's trying to figure out again, he's not very. How do I put this the right way? He wasn't very good at showing his emotions until he finally again,
Yeah.
yeah. When we build up to that episode when he finally tells him like, "I love you, and I love you more as a friend." Again, I was sobbing so hard. I'm like, if they somehow like they're about to grab my heart and they can go into so many different directions, and he says, "I love you," maybe not that way, but we have forever to figure it out. Again, like it feels so organic because yeah, I agree and I understand that today it can kind of feel like a buzzword of yes we have to check boxes just to make sure, but again it doesn't feel like a gimmick to me. It feels very organic to the DNA of the show, and I think that's you guys did a really good job with it, and I'm glad that it is important to you guys, but also to find a way to be like, hey, let's just make this feel natural.
Yeah, I think look, it was important to me. It was important to Beth. Our writers' room is is incredibly diverse. We got all these different voices in there, and it isn't it's just not difficult. It's not difficult to do. It isn't difficult to have diversity in your show. It isn't. So if somebody comes on your show and says, "Well, it's really really hard," no, it's not.
What can you talk about the move between Netflix and HBO Max? Like, how much did you? Because were you guys are remind me again? Were you guys already filming when you made the move, or what? What was the
Yes.
timeline? Okay, how much did you guys have to go back and like change a lot of things?
No.
And okay, so let's talk about for example, the Death cameo, for example. How did
Well,
it come
that was
about?
one of the. I mean, that was one of the things that we weren't allowed to do when we were at HBO Max, and not because like HBO Max was like, no, it was just because everybody had signed deals and contracts and they stipulated certain things, and so just legally we weren't allowed to include that character, which is tricky because of who
Running
who
away
the
from
boys
death?
are, and yeah, I mean it's she's part of it. We were filming. Let's see. We had 2 more episodes to film when the shift happened, and it happened very quickly. And the deal with Netflix closed very quicker than I've ever seen a TV deal close. So that was fun. And we had the shift over, but Netflix, I mean, look, they took the show because they were happy with what we were making. So there wasn't sort of now we're the new masters and we want you to change everything. A lot of it just was pretty set. Like I said earlier, the thing that they opened the door. I mean, they basically were like, "Hey, if it's okay with Neil and Alan, we think it'd be cool to have the shows cross in different ways. Like, would you like to pitch some things?" And I was like, "I would love to pitch some things." And so we got Alan and Neil's permission on the things that we wanted to do before we pitched it to Netflix. So we didn't create one of those situations where Netflix was telling them. Everyone got excited about it. So, I mean, listen, the death cameo is cool. I think we have another cameo in the show that's my favorite cameo because it's so comic book accurate. But
Despair.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, this will drop on the day it
I
drops.
know. No, I get it. But that was my look. I think Despair is the scariest character in Sandman, even though sort of in the Sandman, the television show, season 1, you didn't get very much of her. You just sort of got her in conjunction with Desire, and Mason's performance as Desire is like out of this world. So perfect and lovely. I was like, there is an opportunity here to get Despair into the show just a little bit and kind of make her the scary kind of member of the family that she is to me reading the comics. And so she's Despair, right? So getting her in was great. That's my favorite thing. Although it wasn't, I will say this, it was insane because Kirby came on set and just is that character. I mean, like the minute you say action, she just radiates, and you can see it in the Sandman. You can see it in Dead Boys. It's I don't know. The casting on the Sandman just knocked it out of the park with Kirby and Donna. They're both fantastic, and it was a pleasure.
Was there again, what was something that was really important for you to add to, again, something that we haven't seen in the comics before with the Deadpool detectives? What was something that was important for you and your writing team of adding that, hey, as we're bringing these characters to life in live, this will be a show that can, run for multiple seasons. What was that something that you really were like, I want to make sure that this is part of whatever, however long this goes, I want to make sure this is part of it.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I always thought, okay, how do we capture the kind of charm of the? I mean, look, it's a horrifying ghost story. Like the way they're introduced in Seasons of Mist, like that story is like the ghost bullies and the kind of awful headmaster and like all that stuff is it's intense and it's scary and it's got this thing. I wanted the show to feel dark. I wanted the show to feel fun, and I wanted the show to feel emotionally grounded, so that because it's like the Flight Attendant. Like if it's an emotionally grounded story, then you can go crazy with spectacle. And so that's, I mean, Dead Boys is even bigger canvas in terms of just being able to include like giant carnivorous mushrooms and like big sea monsters and going to hell and realizing those things. And so but I really wanted to make sure that we held on to the sort of the easiest way to explain it is call it a Hardy Boys lens that we put over it, so that basically like each episode is telling a larger story, but each episode is a case of the week. And I thought it was really important, if you're going to do the Dead Boy Detective Agency, that you have a sort of case of the week model that's also flexible enough that the case isn't the only thing that's going on. And so you do have their lives or deaths, afterlives, running in the background. And I felt like that was really important. And I feel like it worked really well. And so I don't know, I'm excited for people to see it. There hasn't been something on TV like this in a little bit. And so, and certainly not as strange as ours is. I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the episodes that really stood out to me was the time loop episode, when we really see Charles's really really rough upbringing more on display. And again, it's like, yeah, we're dealing with the world of supernatural, but at the same time, like, these are kids that dealt with a lot of common issues that exist today. So how much have you mapped out the show? Again, I know some shows they have like a 5-season plan and stuff like that. But like, do you know? Like, do you have in your mind a destination for where these kids
Yes.
end up at? If that makes sense.
I do. Obviously, I'm not gonna.
No, don't no.
I
understand.
love this podcast, but I'm not gonna say. But yes, we do. Yes, we do. And whenever Netflix tells us, as long as we get a little bit of warning, whenever Netflix tells us we can't do anymore, I believe that it's something that we'll be able to execute, that will feel super satisfying. For me, like, it's always with creating the shows, you have to have a sense of where they're going and kind of a sense of what an ending would look like, only because you want the audience to feel satisfied when they get to the end of season 1, season 2, whenever it stops. I think
it could be the next Supernatural. It could be 15 seasons.
I mean, knock on wood and for your lips to God's ears, but that would be very hard, considering our Dead Boys are going to grow up. But I do think that we have a plan in place. We have big picture arcs for all of our leads.
Having worked on Supernatural, did it kind of help you prepare a little bit? I'm thinking on this specific show of where you get to play with a lot of elements like Supernatural, but also a lot of dramatic themes. But like, how much did working on those 4 seasons of Supernatural help you for Deadpool Detectives?
I mean, immensely. If you learn a lot on like that show is a showrunner machine. Like if you look at all the showrunners that have come out of Supernatural, not that ran Supernatural necessarily, but like then either were showrunners there and went on to do other things like Sarah Gamble or Jeremy Carver, or just people that came up through Supernatural who've gone on to be showrunners on other shows. It really like pumps them out. And it's because you really find out very quickly on that show what it is to be responsible for story, because you're sort of there's not a traditional writer's room in a sense. Like you're kind of breaking on your own, but then talking to the other writers and meeting with the other writers to be like, how does this fit with what you're doing? Like, what's going on? Are we checking the boxes? Are we hitting the benchmarks? And then you're responsible for pitching your own story, then your own outline, for writing your script, carrying it through, having the production meetings. And in Andrew and I don't know how it always was on the show because I came in during Andrew's tenure, but Andrew and Bob were always incredibly supportive about you being involved. And so, yeah, you learn a lot. And I think the biggest lesson I learned on Supernatural is like, you can't count on other people to fix your story. Like, if there's something that feels wonky, you have to just keep hammering at it until you figure it out. You can't just count on someone's going to come along and fix it, because then they don't, and it goes to air, and the internet erupts because you didn't fix the thing. I feel like I learned what it is to be responsible for story in a different way on Supernatural, which I think is the biggest piece of, that carried into being a showrunner.
Can you talk about running this specific room? You and Beth. How does it work? How does it look like working together with her and running a show like this with the detectives of the writer that you guys got? How did this first season look for you guys? Despite given how long this is all taking.
Well, I think first of all, I'm incredibly lucky to have Beth as a partner, because she was sort of wrapping up season 1 of Sweet Tooth, and she had like a ton of development, and she didn't need to get on a show. And I didn't think that I was going to get to work with her, but then we had a meeting and she sort of fell in love with the idea, and it was far enough along that she could read the pilot, maybe even watch an early cut of the pilot. And then she got excited and came on, and we just have it was kind of, knock on wood, it was kind of effortless. Like we just kind of vibe. We fit very well in a yin yang kind of way. She's made so much television that it takes something big to shake her. And that's great, because I tend to overreact sometimes when things are going wrong, and she doesn't. I mean, she's got a cool head and she's very cool as a person. So we run the room together. It's very, I don't know, it just feels very natural. I don't really know how to describe it because we just kind of started doing it. But like when it comes to things like draft delivery deadlines and things like that, like she maps all that stuff out, and then I just have to stick to it because she's much better on the efficiency side than I am.
Now, I'm sure you can't reveal too much, but let's.
That's always a fun way to start a question.
Yeah, I know. I just want to be just so you're aware. I'm aware that yes, But what can you, following this finale, like what can you disclose about what would a potential season 2 look like?
Well, it would be the boys solving mysteries.
You don't say.
I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. If we're lucky enough to have a season 2, we have a plan in place. I think it would involve spending a lot more time in London. But there's a plan in place for season 2. There are a plan in place for season 3. Like we've done our homework, but we just have to kind of hope people watch now.
Well,
so we get an opportunity to do those things that I can't talk to you about.
fair enough, and maybe hope perhaps more crossovers with Sandman. Because I know they have their season coming up and so on, and I don't know. I'm almost like expecting. Are these kids are they gonna somehow show up in season 2, or
Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't it be crazy if that happened?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, yeah, I mean, if I can ask this, by the way, was there another cameo that you guys were trying to work out that you guys couldn't get because of scheduling or something? Did you guys get everything that you wanted?
No, we got everything that we asked for.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, no, it felt like there were organic places to do cameos that really helped elevate the show. It felt like it didn't want to be a clown car. Like I didn't want to just put people in because we could. And we got very lucky with Donna and Kirby, because not only are they incredibly professional and we're up to do it, but also they're just rad people. Like, they were so great when they came to our set. And so we got to do everything we wanted to do. I think if we do get lucky enough to make more, then we do have plans for further crossover.
And now, what are you? I mean, I know there's some things you're working on. I know I saw your name come up the other day, a few weeks ago, about taking a little trip to space. I don't know how much you can talk about that, but what's coming up for you?
I'm working on some movies. I have a couple television projects and then some movies. That stuff in the press was very cool, but it did not come from me, and it's not something that I can talk about.
Mhm.
But I'm working on some very cool movie projects, and it's working with some people that I look up to very much, and so it's a cool experience.
And something I also ask a lot of showrunners is, if you could clear up a misconception about the job of a showrunner, that whether you see it from fans on social media or from critics and so on, what is something that you would like to clear up about what it's like to be a showrunner?
I don't know. It's such a weird term because it means something. I guess what I would say is that it means something different to every showrunner. There are certain things that every showrunner has to do, and ultimately you are responsible for your show, and that's why you're the showrunner. And you have to make all the decisions. I mean, the buck stops at you, and if it doesn't go well, it's going to be your fault. And if it does go well, it's everybody else is very happy to step in and say, "Look what I did." That's just a reality of being a showrunner. But I think it's different on every show. It's different for every person because it is one of those weird jobs that is a little bit amorphous in its job description. And so there are all different types of showrunners. People just kind of create their own little fiefdom out of a show. So it's got its own rules and its own culture. So it's different for every show. So when I see people talking about like, well, on such and such a show, they did this, so it must be this, or, I mean, listen, I've read so many things online, and I stopped, by the way. I don't look online very much about my own shows because of my experience on Supernatural, because that fandom is voracious and very dedicated and very excited and very enthusiastic in a way that can sometimes be overwhelming. Like half of Tumblr thinks that I'm dead because of they call me the ghost of STEVE YOCKEY because someone made a joke about me rolling over in my grave about something, and people got confused and thought that I was really dead. So yeah, it can get crazy online. So I just sort of take it all in stride.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know about it either. Someone forwarded it to me, and so then I like posted some funny thing on Twitter that was like, funny for me, that was like the reports of my death are largely exaggerated or something, and the fandom was like, oh no, he knows, and I was like, oh wait, I shouldn't have posted that, and they're like, oh, he's on Tumblr, and I'm like, no, I'm not, but you can't talk directly to the fans and explain those things, so I just get a kick out of it, basically. It's fun that people refer to me as the ghost of STEVE YOCKEY, I guess.
Oh goodness, oh my god, that's I did not. I mean, again, I have seen that. I've seen a lot of corners of that fandom, but like that people would just now go ahead and just assume it. Yeah, he died. It's that's a mood. Really.
Well, I'm not sure. By the way, I say and this would be, if you're going to include this would be an important piece to include. I say with a grain of salt that they think I'm dead. I think it's become like a thing to say that I'm dead. I don't think they actually think that I'm dead, because obviously I'm not.
Yeah, no. But if you were, I don't know who I would be talking to right now. So
my ghost, I'm talking to the ghost of STEVE YOCKEY, which might be appropriate for Dead Boy Detectives, but is not the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, but this show is so much fun, and I, after having, again, because I covered a little bit about it here and there in news, and I'm just kind of wondering, wow, it's really been a couple years now, because I remember just the day we heard that it was in development. I'm like, what is Dead Boy Detectives? I gotta, at a comic book, I had to Google and see what this all was all about. Mm-hmm. But no, I cannot wait to see where you guys are taking these characters, especially now existing in the larger Sandman universe, and seeing all the opportunities, and again, I would love to see what your team would do with more of those characters. Just seeing what you guys did with Death and with Despair. I'm like, oh, like what would Steve do? He wrote for Dream or for Joanna Constantine and stuff like that. So the potential is endless there. But no,
We
but
have a list. We have a list of people that we'd like to use. So we'll see if we can keep checking it off.
yeah, no, but and it's also cool because also Neil was has been tweeting about him. It's kind of like, man, it's really we're really living in the era of Neil Gaiman right now, where everything of his is coming to life.
Well, I have to say, like I can't say enough. Sometimes people always say like don't meet your heroes or whatever, but like he is so incredibly creative, supportive, collaborative. Like he really loves that people are bringing his work to life, and I'm just, like I said, it still blows me away that he's as involved and supportive and kind of just like, we just get little notes like, oh, the finale was amazing, and you're like, ah, we kind of freak out a little bit about it, but like it really is a pleasure to get to work on a property that comes from his mind.
No, I can only imagine. So, but Steve, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for telling me your your experience as a showrunner, and I cannot wait to see more of what comes for you, whether it's with these boys or with Star Trek or whatever it is that you else have cooking. So hopefully we can talk more in the future about your work. But no, but congrats on what looks to be another amazing addition to not just the comic book landscape, but just the television in general. Because again, I think this will be something that will connect with a lot of people. And again, like I know you talked about it, this was something that was came to you at a very emotional time in your life. So I'm hoping that this will kind of do the same for people out there, dealing with these themes.
I hope you're right, man. And thank you for talking. It's been such a pleasure.
And welcome back. That was my chat with Steve Yockey for Deadwood Detectives. And hopefully, like I said, hope you guys enjoyed the show, and you can also now enjoy this little post-mortem, so to speak, and getting to know more about the insides of Deadwood Detectives. And hopefully we'll have a long future on Netflix, because I love the show. I cannot wait to see more of it. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation. So, but that's going to be it for this week's episode of the Showrunner Whisperer. The next episode will be debuting on Wednesday. We're going to go back to Wednesdays because last time I got, the last episode got a little late, but Wednesday, May 8th is when the next episode is coming out. And really excited for that one, because that one, I will give you a little tease. This one will be the first time we do a two-parter, because the conversation I had with said showrunner, we spoke for 2 hours, and there's a lot to take in there. So this will be the first time we split them up. So all of May it will be the same showrunner, for the all of May, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. And yeah, so with that said, you can find the Showrunner Whisperer on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok at Showrunner Whisperer. On Twitter, it's just at Showrunner Talk, because Elon Musk just doesn't like us increasing our handles. And of course, you can find the Showrunner Whisperer as part of the Multiverse of Color website. So showrunnerwhisperer.com takes you to all the episodes of the show, but also you can check out the entire Multiverse of Color outlet. And you can subscribe to the Showrunner Whisperer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, Amazon Music. You can subscribe on YouTube Podcast and so many other platforms. Wherever you can listen to your podcast on is where you can hear us. It's where you can hear the Showrunner Whisperer. And if you have any questions for us, email showrunnerwhisperer@gmail.com. And at some point, once we start getting a little bit further into the show, we are going to try and announce when we have guests coming up, so you guys can submit questions. So that's a good way to keep in touch with us. And if you want to follow me, I'm at Animaback all over social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube, you name it. I'm also an entertainment journalist for screenwriter.com. I write daily news and interviews every day, and I'm also the editor-in-chief of Multiverse of Color. And also I'm a gamer, I'm a streamer. So I'm on Twitch, I'm on Kick, and I'm on YouTube several times every weekend. So it's at Animaback all my links, all the links that I'm referencing right now will be in the show notes. So don't even worry about it. You won't have to search for anything. You can just click, 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 a click. Something like that. And yeah, that's what's on. That's what's up. So we're gonna wrap it up here. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in for episode 3 of the Showrunner Whisperer. I cannot wait for you guys to hear our next conversation. And more episodes are being recorded, so get ready. But for all of us here on the Showrunner Whisperer, for all of my media members, I'm Andrew Bide, and we'll see you next time on the Showrunner Whisperer.